So practical experience right now is king. Education, super important. Higher ed, degrees, certs, they have their places. But what I'm seeing in my world is that practical experience, of the three of those elements, practical experience is the number one.
Welcome to ACI Learning's webinar series. We're so excited to have you joining us today. I'm going to be your host for today, Sophie Goodwin, sitting down with Jerry Ozier to talk more about what the future has in store for the cybersecurity industry and how the world's responding to this growing cyber threat that we're dealing with. So, Jerry, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you? I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Hey, Sophie, thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to have this conversation today, too.
Yeah, it's been really good to be able to kind of talk to you over the past couple of days and get prepped for this. Sounds like you've got a lot of knowledge to share, and I'm really looking forward to it. And we are going to have, for those of you watching, an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So drop your questions in the chat if you think of any during the show. And at the end of the presentation, we'll get to those and do our best to answer as many of those as we can. But for now, what do you say, Jerry? You want to jump on in?
Yeah, I'd love to dive in, and I can't wait for the question period. I love engaging with the community and in chat, and really answering all the questions. So absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the best part. So, we're going to be talking today about, I guess, this growing cyber threat, kind of what's in store for the future in cybersecurity. Where do you want to begin?
Well, I can just dive right in. If you're been paying attention or not, it's so front page news right now that there's a just a massive explosion of cybersecurity attacks. It's like pretty much every single day in the news. Whether and there's also like privacy things like what we're seeing with the TikTok and the legislation and what happened in Montana, as well as advanced persistent threat actors operating at the military level and the nation state level. We just saw some interesting stuff in today's news around what's happening in Kenya with their government being hacked. There's also at the cyber criminal level, which is just all about straight cash, homie, when it comes to ransomware operations and business email compromise operations. So there's just like up and down the stack and left to right across the breadth of it all. There's so much cybersecurity um, challenges and risks, and businesses are just needing to really address it head on. Individuals need to address it as well, but obviously businesses have the capital and the resources to properly address it. And personally, since I'm such an advocate of cybersecurity and I love this industry so much, I love that we being I'm cybersecurity personified, we are moving out of the shadow of IT, if you will, and moving much more into its own space, its own light, being perceived by the business, which is now getting us the recognition, the time that we need, and the budget, more importantly, to be able to hire staff that is appropriate, skill up staff so they're able to actually meet the demands that the business needs, and really at the end of the day, reduce cyber risk for the business, and allow it to continue business operations. It's fascinating what's going on right now, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to even have this talk today with you. Is just why is there this explosive growth in opportunities in the career in the workforce, and we'll get into all those details in a bit. But yeah, this is my high level opening thesis on why we need to address this head on.
Well, like you said, it feels like it's hard to scroll through LinkedIn, Twitter. It's hard to watch the news or anything without seeing something that's relating to some kind of cyber threat or cyber issue, which obviously is not great. I mean, we don't want things to, we don't want that bad things to happen, but it does, like you said, mean a growing industry and growing jobs, it sounds like. So what do you think? You kind of touched on a couple of things there. What do you think is maybe some of the top reasons for this kind of growing disruption?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I had provided a couple slides in advance. Maybe if we could pull those up. Yeah, you could see. I think there's multiple things, right? There's like a handful of rocks being thrown at what's causing this disruption, but three of what I would consider the larger rocks that you want to keep an eye out on are featured right here. So cyber insurance, I put that one first. If you know me for a minute, you know that I'm a huge advocate of cyber insurance. I think it's an area in our industry that gets very little pub and very little attention, but it's actually in a very compelling area within our industry, and it's a massive lever right now for getting businesses to engage and in oh my gosh, what's the word? And invest, excuse me, into it. So I'll go in greater detail on insurance. Now, business email compromise, this is another interesting one that's really driving it. Ransomware is the top threat in our industry right now, to any business, right? You can't, like, literally, it's, I could open search engine right now and type in ransomware news, and there's probably something within the last 24 hours of some business that's been hit. But business email compromise is like this sleepy second giant that's in the space, but it's in the shadow of ransomware. But it directly affects CFOs, and like they're the ones who see it. And by the way, CFOs are the ones who hold the purse strings, if you will, and release money, approve budgets, these type of things. So when they feel the heat coming off of the stove, they know that this is a real problem, and then they're much more, from a human psychological perspective, motivated to want to make that pain stop or turn that heat down. And then the third one is coming from regulations, right? So, whether or not you're big on big government or not, at the end of the day, there are government agencies like the SEC that are put in place to protect individuals, protect investors in this case, and they are beginning to introduce all sorts of regulations that are ratcheting up the requirements, the demands, and the obligations of businesses that are publicly traded to have certain levels of cybersecurity governance and other things, which we'll get into in a minute. But my point with this is, if the Fortune 500 companies are putting in, because they're required to put in cybersecurity mechanisms, capabilities, elements, it's going to trickle down. They set the tone for what is considered, accepted norms. They are normalizing this behavior and this level of accountability for cybersecurity. So that has a trickle down effect, which again is going to result in a massive boom of cybersecurity jobs. Like, not that there's already not a boom, right? There's 3.5 million unfilled cyber jobs right now. So there's going to be more. And good news for those who are in chat that might be looking to break in the industry. I would make an argument that there's going to be greater opportunity of entry level, specifically GRC analyst roles, which I'll be happy to elaborate on later if you'd like. Because the big challenge in our industry has always been, oh, I need an entry level person with 5 years of experience, which is like, what? Like, that doesn't even map, man. But we are maturing past that, and as the jobs get more and more wide open, and the demand gets more clearly understood by the business, which is happening. They're going to identify, like, okay, we just need a risk analyst. We just need an information security awareness analyst. Like, these are entry level roles that we can systemize and put people in place. So yeah, this is my opening thoughts. Sophie, any thoughts before I drill into one of these items?
I mean, what you mentioned about, like, how there are positions that'll say, "This is an entry level role, but you need 5 years experience." I mean, I don't see the problem. As long as you start doing this stuff when you're 13, by the time you graduate high school, you can start full time, right? So you just gotta start them young, which is not
Yeah.
super feasible.
Yeah, I saw a posting, yes, just for fun. I saw a job posting for a prompt engineer the other day that needed 3 years of ChatGPT experience, which, like, that just came out like 2 months ago.
I was gonna
So
say, I didn't
I
know
don't know
about
what they're
that
thinking
before, like,
there.
the beginning of the year. I don't think I knew that existed, so interesting, okay. So you have to know the future. You basically have to be able to predict the future. Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That's easy enough. So it looks like there is, I mean, we kinda talked about a couple of different things beforehand about, things that are affecting the cyber industry and causing this disruption, but you just went over a couple of the big ones right there. And as
Mhm.
a reminder, if you guys have any questions about anything that we're talking about, please drop them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end. But for now, I'm curious about that first one you mentioned, cyber insurance. How does that relate to what we're talking about today?
Oh my God, yeah. Well, hopefully you don't have socks on, Sophie, because I'm about to blow them off your feet. Cyber insurance. Okay, here's the deal. Um, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, cyber insurance was basically a throw-in, right? Like, you'd get a policy for, like, business insurance, or maybe you're a healthcare provider and you'd get a malpractice, and they would throw a cyber insurance rider on. It was like the Oklahoma Sooners, and it was like a land grab. Like, oh, let's just get everybody signed up with us for cyber insurance, and then, in a year or two, we'll start turning the premiums up and get that money, right? So that's what happened. Now, here's the problem. Ransomware came on the scene. And you can see from the slide, this is in 2022. Globally, the amount of money being spent on insurance is $6 billion, with one third of that being in the United States. So we'll focus on that in a hot minute. getting back to the insurance, because I feel like in order to appreciate what is happening today and why it's driving the market, we have to appreciate that how we got here. Okay. So land grab in 2015. And by the way, I want to recognize Jeremiah Grossman for his talk at Black Hat concerning this, because it was very, very insightful and forward thinking. So nice job, Jeremiah. So fast forward to 2017, WannaCry hits. The criminal cyber enterprise, like the goons at EvilCon 2017 are like, hey guys, ransomware makes a ton of money. Let's get on this. And then you just see this explosion, this proliferation of ransomware threat actors going ham. And the thing is, it doesn't cost much to get started, to get set up. You can attack wildly. You can attack, thousands of businesses all, all within a short amount of time. It's not, from an insurance perspective, it's not like a hurricane where you can identify like, oh, it's, this many potential houses. This is the season. It's not, a fire where you can say like, okay, fires occur like once every 10 years. Like we can kind of look at the actuarial tables and understand this. And basically the insurance company managed their risk. What ended up happening is insurance companies are just getting slapped all around, and they're ending up not making money. They're losing money because they have to pay out on these policies. And this is where the insurance companies get really exciting. So insurance companies, they're going to pass the burden, the cost burden downstream. Okay. So follow me, chat. Okay. So I'm a company, right? And I am well aware of ransomware, not because I've hired anyone to help me with ransomware or help me with cybersecurity, but because I'm a business person and I read the news and I see this company get hit, or I live in Spartanburg, South Carolina, or Oakland, California, or Atlanta, Georgia, and my city has been brought down by a ransomware attack. Okay. It is mainstream and it's touching a lot of people. So you don't have to be like, elbow deep up in cybersecurity's business in order to appreciate ransomware. So you look at it and you're like, oh, we really need business insurance. Like, remember that rider you threw in? Will that work for ransomware? Oh yeah, no problem, business person. Okay, cool, we're good to go. Then it comes up for renewal because these policies expire after a certain amount of time. Comes up for renewal, and it's like, okay, hey, before we renew your policy, why don't you tell us if you have multi-factor authentication turned on? And it's like, what's that mean? And they're like, do you have to log in like two different ways, like password and a thing? No, no, no. We just use passwords. Okay, yeah, no, that's no problem. It's cool, but your insurance policy, the premium is now 8x. So I know it cost $10,000 before for a $500,000 policy for your small business, but now it's $80,000. And when you look at the balance sheet and you see expenses and that line item goes up 8x, you better believe that catches the business's eye. And when I say the business, I'm talking about, leadership, right? The CFO is obviously concerned with the money, but the business, the people who are responsible for the health of the business and it making money and producing widgets or whatever they're doing, they see that and they're like, what is this? What, explain this? And they're like, well, you have terrible security. And this is what's driving. This is the big, crescendo. This is where this is driving the investment that companies are making into cybersecurity. So this company says, bro, I'm not going to spend 8x on a policy. What is this multi-factor thing? And they're like, no, you just have to turn it on. Okay, so we just turn it on. Now we have it. Oh, wait, I can't log into anything. Yeah, because you have to enable and configure it. Oh my God, this is so stressful. Like, we need to hire someone to be responsible for this thing over here because I'm a business person. I make widgets. I do sales forecasting and stuff. What I don't do is this multi-factor thing. Okay. And that's just a simplified example, right? Like the insurance company is going to actually require several other things. Like, are you doing patching? Are you doing privileged access management? How often are you doing account reviews? Are you, a million other things, right? So you need to hire someone who understands that. And before chat flames me here and says, listen, IT can do that. Listen, with all due respect, a lot of businesses outsource their IT or they have smaller IT firms or IT departments where those individuals are matrixed and have multiple responsibilities. Yes, they might be able to set up MFA or they might be able to baseline configure a machine. But if you're not doing it with regularity and maintaining that risk posture, the insurance company is going to sniff that like, week old fish and be like, no, like, bro, that doesn't cut it. So they need to invest in those roles, not because you need a like, not because hiring someone is what the insurance company's looking for, but to get to what the insurance company's looking for, they need to hire someone to produce that and deliver on that work. So this is one reason why insurance companies are really inflating this. And by the way, like 8x, this is happening across the board. Some insurance companies won't even talk to you. They won't quote you a policy if you have like not even like fundamental information security. Like if you are borderline like negligent and just a hot mess on fire, they won't even write you a policy, which is even more concerning because of the business. Because then you're basically telling them their baby's ugly, and they're like, that's not right. I don't want this level of risk. Um, okay, so that's what's going on with insurance. Also, insurance companies are basically driving security programs because of this, which does require staff to build and maintain. So, Sophie, this is just one way. I told you a lot of people don't, they sleep on insurance, but I'm telling you, it's hot. It's really hot.
Well, and it sounds like it's worth it to hire somebody, have a consultant or something to make sure that this stuff is taken care of and kind of monitor all this because it may cost you now, but would you rather just pay the money and do that now to pay somebody to do it or wind up having to pay all this money for an insurance policy or worse, inevitably when you're attacked or you're a victim of a breach having to pay for that later on. It's worth it, it sounds like. Just to hire somebody now and just take care of it. And on the slide you had like a global number and then a US number for cyber insurance as far as the money goes. And I think the US number was like a third of the total or something. So here in the US, like this is a big deal.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. I forgot to speak to the slide. Yeah, so you can see, and this is relatively recent numbers. I think 2022, a third is in the United States. So for our international friends in chat, there's opportunity there. But for the United States based attendees, look at this: a third of a third of the world's spend on cyber insurance is in the United States. That is directly correlating to the amount of opportunity that's going to be driving based on that microcosm case study I just gave you. That is being rinsed and repeated across businesses of all sizes in the United States, like right now. And it's only going to continue to grow. I wholeheartedly believe that because they don't want to not have insurance, first of all, and they don't want like they can't maintain the burden of maintaining that um responsibility without having someone in it. And by the way, just as a fun fact, if you want to like double click or drill into or whatever you want to say, these roles, yes, like set up MFA or do some technical configuration, put DMARC, DKIM, SPF in, or whatever you're going to do. I would still argue what they're going to want to do is hire a generalist cybersecurity, analyst, right? This isn't going to be like someone who's like a team on a SOC or something like that. You will do some technical stuff, but really you are going to be an interface to the business. The CEO, the CFO, they want to be able to pick up the CIO really want to be able to pick up the phone and say, I have a cybersecurity person, right? And I'm going to call them right now. Like, hey, cyber person, we have this external need. We have this third party asking for something. We have this email that just came in. What do I do? Like, they want that easy button to hit. And GRC is where that role is because a lot of times it's usually inquiry coming from an external party like the insurance company. Hey, what are your controls that you have in place? Like a lot of the insurance, this is a hot problem for the insurance company, but there's no standard for what their questions are. So some insurance companies will give you like ridiculous, 50 pages, and some of them will give you like 5 questions. But that's a diatribe that I flip out about it, like in the after hour show if you want. But here's my thing. They don't, the business can't read those questionnaires, right? Even something as simple as like, how often are you doing like disaster recovery testing or business continuity planning, right? Something is simple to me, right? And I'm biased, right? But like those terms are simple and understood, and we know what that means. A lot of times the business people don't even know what that means. And you know what the business people don't want to do? They don't want to like Google terms and then try to, ham fist answers to these things. They want to take it and hand it to a cyber person and say, fill this out. And that's a GRC capability, right? Like GRC's main focus, if you boil it down, is to interface with the business. And what I'm telling you right now is a business interfacing need that the business has. So, anyways, lots of money being sent in there, lots of opportunity. I love myself some GRC, but the final thing I'll share with you that's really important to note, and I think that this grabbed major headlines and was, it was front page. So a lot of people who weren't already on the ransomware train are now fully on the ransomware train. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 months ago, it's been in litigation for years, but 3 or 4 months ago, a court in New Jersey finally ruled in favor of Merck. Okay. In a insurance civil case, Zurich International, which is a massive insurance provider, had it issued a insurance policy to Merck for cyber insurance. Okay. Merck got hit with NotPetya ransomware, which was basically a wiper. They call it ransomware, but it wasn't. It was a wiper virus, and it like destroyed Merck. Okay. This is like a pharmaceutical company, big pharma, like systems offline, unable to deliver product, pharmaceuticals expiring on shelf because they needed to be kept at a certain temperature, like massive problems. $1.4 billion worth of problems, to be accurate. Merck sued Zurich because Merck said, Zurich, pay this insurance policy. We're down. This is why we have insurance. And Zurich said, no. This was Russia on Ukraine action. This was an act of war. You can clearly see a disclaimer in the policy that says act of war not covered. Boom. Okay. A judge ruled that that was not an act of war, and that in fact this was in scope of the insurance policy, and they got hit with $1.4 billion. Immediately after that happened, Mondelez, the massive food conglomerate, you can Google Mondelez, they immediately sued Zurich on the same premise because Zurich didn't pay them on their insurance policy when they got hit with the same exact NotPetya ransomware wiper. Okay, and Mondelez got like 100 million or something like that, or 140 million. So we are talking massive amounts of money that the insurance company is pushing out, and that's not good. It was a unbelievable precedent to set, because now any company that gets hit, the insurance company cannot claim act of war unless it's like clearly an act of war, right? Like maybe in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict right now, but they couldn't do that. So the only thing the insurance companies have to do in some way to kind of reconcile and protect themselves from going out of business is to ratchet up rates, ratchet up rates. So it's all about the cash, but then also ratchet up the demands that they're putting on their clients to have minimum security standards. So starting to say, you must adhere with NIST cybersecurity framework. You must adhere with ISO 27001. You must have these minimum things. You must be acceptable to have an independent third-party auditor of our choosing come in and assess your environment. So there's just a lot of machinations of insurance capabilities, cybersecurity capabilities and cybersecurity work that needs to be executed because of these type of like massive tidal wave, not incidents, but like decisions that are coming down through the legal system that are setting precedents that are highly impacting the insurance industry.
So it sounds like now, especially with attacks like what you just mentioned with NotPetya and everything like that affecting these big companies, cyber insurance really is, it's like, it's not just an additional thing that's kind of like an aside in addition to this other insurance that you might have. This is like a big deal. And like you said, maybe it means more jobs or more work in the cybersecurity industry because this is becoming such a big thing. A couple of times when you mentioned, when you were talking about NotPetya, you said it was ransomware and then clarified it's not really ransomware, it's a wiper. But ransomware is like where the spotlight goes. That's kind of like a buzzword. And that's kind of what people think of when they think of cyber threats. But you mentioned earlier, I think BEC as kind of like a sleeper threat, something that's maybe a
Mhm.
close second that doesn't really get as much attention or as much spotlight in the news.
Yeah, it really does. I recently gave a talk in San Diego, like highlighting the importance that people should put on business email compromise, because it really is a massive criminal enterprise, and I mean, it's literally second only to ransomware. Sophie, you'd be stunned if I gave you the numbers. So this is just reported losses in the United States to the FBI on business email compromise. 2019, 2 million, $2 million. Okay, that's not so bad. Okay, 2020, $10 million. 2021, $40 million. 2022, upwards of $70 million. Like it just keeps ratcheting. And just to level set really quick on what is business email compromise, because I do love walking it back and being able to explain how we got here so people can appreciate it. Business email compromise is a cyber attack. It's very simple. You can have more complicated versions of it, but essentially, what a criminal threat actor does is say, sends an email to Sophie in accounting, right? Sophie works in accounting now, and says, "Hey, I'm Jerry from I'm Jerry from the water department, and here's your bill." And Sophie all day, every day is just taking in invoices, paying them and sending them out, taking in invoices, paying them and sending them out. And this one comes in, yep, pays it, sends it out. So business email compromise can be as simple as just sending an invoice to a business and having them pay it. Like it's literally that easy, which is absurd, but it happens. And I just gave you the numbers, right? $50 million a couple years ago, just in reported losses. And you better believe, okay, you better believe that on average, a business email compromise attack is about $120,000 as of data from 2021. It's probably gone up since then. Okay, so we're a $700 million company, and we get hit for $120,000 business email compromise hit. That is less than 1% of our annual revenue. And I'm not minimalizing $120,000. If someone stole $120,000 from me, you better believe I would feel it. Okay. But a business, $700 million, $120,000 hit, like they're just going to keep going, right? It's like a speed bump. They're not happy they lost that money, but they're not going to take the time to call the FBI, bring in an investigative team. Maybe they're moving fast. Maybe they're working on something, whatever it is. Maybe the CFO doesn't want to get fired, so they just kind of like sweep it under the rug, whatever it is. So that's just reported losses. It's definitely much higher than that. Now, some of these attacks can actually get a little bit more, clever and interesting with hacking email accounts and then sending it as the CFO, the classic, like, I'm about to get on a plane for a big business deal, send the money, like it better be there before I land or you're fired, those type of things. Really quick, interesting statistics here. So it says 65% of organizations are facing business email compromise attacks, right? So flip a coin, right? And by the way, this is just on data that's being reported. Flip a coin, and you're more likely to be a victim of business email compromise than not. Okay. And this particular article says the average is rising from 54 to 80,000 in one quarter. Again, I had another statistic from 2021 that pointed out $120,000 per hit. Even if, depending on which one you want to believe, like let's take the lesser number because it's less painful for us, unless you're trying to convince your boss to invest in cybersecurity, then you go with the higher number, right? 80 grand is still not a good payday. And if you look at the numbers, it's a increase in about 40%, right? 50% increase in one quarter. So these threat actors are definitely understanding that these type of behaviors, these type of crimes work, and they happen all the time. Just to put a finer point on it too. Like if you think like, oh, 80 grand, like that's fine and it's good for one person for one payday, but like this is kind of like a small problem. What are you talking about, Jerry, when we're dealing with ransomware upwards in the millions, right? In 2014, 2015, Google, you may have heard of Google, the search engine company. I'm being playful, right? They got business email compromised for $100 million. Okay, $100 million. You would think one of the Fortune 5 companies would have like the crack team, finance and accounting people, right? No, some dude in Latvia started a company that had the same name, except he added an extra letter, as a Taiwanese chip manufacturer or Taiwanese company. And he just started sending invoices to Google and Facebook. Actually, he did both companies, and he did it for 2 years. Made $100 million before he got found out and arrested. So don't think that this only happens to small companies or companies that don't know what they're doing. Believe me, it's much more complicated than that. Now that we appreciate business email compromise and how prolific it is as a crime and how much money it's making, hopefully you guys stayed with me and you didn't just like end the stream and you're like, I'm going to go become a business email compromise threat actor because that's paying. No, Now that we appreciate it, think about this for a hot minute, okay? You are a CFO. And again, guys, 65% of orgs are getting hit with this stuff, right? You're a CFO and you get hit, or an accountant says, hey, like I sent you that money you asked for last night. And they're like, what? Right? You get hit for 80 grand, you get hit for 120 grand. The average starting salary right now in 2023, and again, you have to account for like location, right? Because someone in Silicon Valley is making more than somebody in Omaha, Nebraska. But on average, about $115,000 is the average salary of a cybersecurity professional. And this also accounts for experience levels and all these other things. But just work with me here just for a simple case study. You get hit for 120 grand. You could pay someone for an entire year less than that to do cybersecurity. When you get hit with the business email compromise and you say, how did this happen? How could this have occurred? How, right? Like just like you're outraged. Like if you've ever seen somebody, and I know not everybody has, but if you've ever seen somebody who just got, victimized or compromised or is actually dealing with an active incident, and they don't work in our industry, they look like a deer lost in the headlights. They're very flummoxed. They want answers, but there's no data to help them answer these questions, right? So when a CFO gets hit and wants to know what to do, how did this happen? One of the things, especially if they call the insurance company, getting back to insurance, is are you doing end user awareness training? Did you train your staff on proper protocols? Did you review what the process looks like? Are there approvals? Are you allowed to request data transfers over $5,000, over $80,000, whatever, via phone, via a text message, right? Like who's making these decisions, right? And then it becomes abundantly clear, or an email, by the way, fishes come in, right? It becomes abundantly clear that there's nobody doing that work. And the CFO goes, well, how do we stop this from happening next time? Right. And eventually it'll get to the point where like we need someone who's focused on this. We need somebody who's aware of what these attacks look like and can help us manage this. Now you could hire a consultant to come in, right? That's one avenue, but that's a point in time fix, right? Cybersecurity is an everlasting, ever changing, dynamic monster. And people who kind of go the cheap route and basically do a one time band aid. That band aid, it's like wearing a band aid and taking a shower for a few days, and then like it gets like wobbly and it falls off, and then you're right back to where you started, right? So that's not the solution. Plus, when you look at the economics of it, they got hit for more than the average salary would cost. And I know multiple businesses personally from my consulting experience, multiple businesses that like they called me after the third time they got hit with a business email compromise. Because like they're thinking like, oh, the first one, like, oh, that we're smarter than that. That's not going to happen again. And then it happens the second time, and oh, let's get serious about it. And then the third time, they're like, all right, we definitely need help. Fast forward, people in business in power positions, with all due respect, right? They eat at the same restaurants, they golf at the same clubs, they go to the same conferences, they text each other, right? They have private Slack channels. They talk to each other. So when I'm getting hit with business email compromise, it really is a red hot irritant, right? And I'm the business at this point, right? So I'm telling other people, like, I can't believe I just gave out this money. And then this other person's like, yeah, it happened to me too. Ugh, right? And then it's like, well, what are you doing to fix it? And the conversation will eventually, believe me, get to you need cyber professionals. Again, this isn't like a get on the GRC bandwagon all aboard, but it kind of is pointing towards this is another GRC capability, right? You don't just flip the switch and get there. The thing is, the business, unfortunately, will have to suffer, right? Nothing gets cybersecurity initiatives moving quicker than an incident, right? Like, fun fact if you're new here, don't ever let an incident go to waste, okay? No one wants incidents, but like, don't let it go to waste because the checkbook will fly open and you can get initiatives because the business doesn't want it to happen again. They want the pain to stop, and they just think like, I'll cut a check and it'll stop, right? Just tell me the number. So just be mindful of that. But this is another reason why I'm arguing my original thesis statement that there is an expansion of workforce roles, specifically in the GRC space, because it's a response to these business email compromise attacks occurring to people in powers of positions of power, excuse me, with funds and finance and budget to allocate to resources to be able to address this problem. I mean, when you really boil it down, that's what's going on. They have a pain, they feel it multiple times, and they just want to stroke a check to make the pain stop. And the cyber GRC analyst is the salve that will address that.
And circling back
Sophie?
to what you said initially about just the like the annual numbers, how it was a certain number this one year and then the next year, oh, now it's 50 million, now it's 70 million. And I know you
Mhm.
said maybe in comparison to something like the money that's caused or the money that's lost, I guess, to ransomware, maybe it doesn't seem like as big of a number. But you were saying that's not even necessarily super accurate because that's just what's reported. So there's businesses that like don't report this kind of thing, but it kinda sounds like maybe there's regulations maybe going into play or laws being signed into play that are gonna require businesses to report when they are a victim of a cyber attack, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you're 100% right. A lot of times they don't report like that one business with the 3 hits. Never reported it, okay? They just kept on moving. But there is external influences that are coming down. The SEC just proposed these rules, I think May 9th of this year, so just a couple weeks ago from recording of this video. They had an open request for comments where you could respond, but they are moving forward. The SEC, and this is I would encourage you in chat to like open a new tab and Google or search for SEC cybersecurity regulations because these like little 2 bullets are just one snippet of what's going on. I was trying to really capture the essence of the SEC regulation. But essentially, what's going to happen is businesses, publicly traded businesses, which, as I said in the opening, is going to have a trickle down effect. Publicly traded businesses are now going to be legally responsible for ensuring cyber risk management is part of their overall corporate governance structure. Now, what does this mean? This means that they need, and they're going to have to disclose it, right? That first bullet, which basically means during like 10K filing or end of the quarter filing or something like that, you'll have to report on that. Okay. We back in the day, if you're old enough to remember, and if you're not, it's worth studying. Enron and Tyco, these companies like abused, just wicked abused and committed all sorts of like heinous kind of financial crimes on investors. And something called Sarbanes-Oxley, which was 2 senators, legislation got pushed through, and it became SOX, SOX, if you've heard of that. And this was a way to provide oversight and management to ensure that these type of behaviors didn't happen again. And there's a little bit of an IT component to that. Well, this is very, very similar in that this is going to require boards to have either someone on the board who is a cybersecurity professional, so that's a job for somebody, or that they have someone working at the company that is responsible for cybersecurity. So somebody who's accountable, somebody you can, wheel in front of, the investors or in front of lawyers or in front of law enforcement or whomever and say, this is what we're doing for cybersecurity. This is the person. This is their job. They are accountable to it. Okay. That's what's going on here. And then on top of that, you have to report on what your approach is. Now, you're not going to get into the control level detail with an SEC filing, obviously, but there will be high level requirements to report on what's your governance structure. Oh, we have an in-house cybersecurity team. We are doing cybersecurity awareness to the workforce. We're implementing best practice technologies, or we're partnering with insert cybersecurity firm here to ensure maintenance. We're doing, like, it didn't say this, but I could see it getting there. Having annual third party independent audits. Right now, you have to have your books audited, right? You have to go through, an independent audit of your books to avoid financial fraud and abuse. Cybersecurity, like it's no different. I mean, you can have like fraudulent claims, oh, we're doing MFA, but we're really not, right? It's incumbent as an investor, if you're investing in a company and they have horrible cybersecurity or they're not taking it serious, it's your money. You are entitled to understand and then make an investment decision based on that risk that you're taking. Putting cybersecurity as a regulation requirement for boards and for organizations, again, with that trickle down effect, it's no different than protecting from financial fraud. It's financial risk, right? It's the same thing. Cyber risk is um cyber risk is ubiquitous, and it permeates the entire organization. Every single person at a business has to be part of the solution of cybersecurity, and it touches every aspect. It's one of the few functions at a business that goes across every single vertical of the business, right? HR, legal, R&D, the executive, all of them need to go across multiple dimensions of cybersecurity. So, what's this mean, Jerry? Okay, the TLDR here is that with this regulation, with needing somebody accountable for cybersecurity, right? Follow me. You're going to have to hire someone, right? Now, that might be like a 25-year senior seasoned vet, right? Somebody who used to be the CISO at, or, led the NSA cyber program or whatever, right? Like, so some of these people, okay, that's cool. And that's not for everybody. That's not entry level. But you got to play it forward. If I say they hire me, right? I'm at whizbang.com, Fortune 500 company, and I'm now accountable. I'm on the board or whatever. I'm leading the information security program. Just play it forward. When I report to the board, okay, that our cyber program is woefully inadequate because of budget, because of resources, because of priorities in the organization, because of obstacles, right? When I report that, that becomes like official, right? Now it's on the board. It's incumbent on the board to make it a priority and push it as a directive, which they're going to, because the investors, I'm telling you, if you are a company and you're like woefully negligent, it's going to hurt you, right? It's hitting them right where it hurts financially, right? And nothing's more motivating than than money. Yeah, what's that? Okay, okay. So yeah, yeah. So, anyways, long story short, it's going to lead to increase because that person in charge is actually going to be hiring staff in order to drive that program forward. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, Sophie.
It kind of seems like this might be a oversimplified comparison, but as far as like reporting when this stuff happens, if there's regulations coming down that are going to enforce that, then you're not going to really have a choice. But I would think it would almost be like if you report it now, it's known that like, oh shoot, this is a new attack or a new organization that maybe we need to worry about. And I would think it would help others then by to report that stuff, kind of like how they say when you're in class, if you have a question, even if you think it's a dumb question, ask it because somebody else has the same question. Like I would think it would only help everybody industry wide if you report these kind of threats. But that's just my kind of thoughts on it. We do have a lot of questions coming in on all these slides
Yes.
and all this information. We're going to get to those questions in just a second. But real quick, here's some information on ACI Learning Hub's Information Security Analyst Program.
ACI Learning would like to introduce you to the Information Security Analyst Program for the Learning Hubs. This program includes 6 weeks of live instructor-led training and includes CompTIA Security Plus, CND, and CEH. These courses will prepare students for jobs as an information security analyst or related roles including cybersecurity specialist, information security auditor, site security administrator, and more. Learn more about this program at acilearning.com.
So a couple different roles in cybersecurity highlighted right there in that video, and we do have quite a few questions about this topic. So this first question comes to us from Zach, who's watching on Zoom. Zach is asking, are there entry-level GRC roles? So I think that's an interesting question because you had mentioned earlier a GRC role, and you kind of said, it was just kind of offhand, you were like, well, that wouldn't be an entry-level role. Is there any overlap between GRC positions and positions that would be appropriate for somebody that's entry-level?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So, like Zach, thanks for the question. Um, GRC might be the most forgiving and like best on ramp for getting into cybersecurity from an entry level position, especially if you don't have a technical background, right? So if you came from a help desk or IT, network admin, sysadmin, stuff like that, you have a little bit more opportunity. But GRC is awesome, and let me just give you a couple options, right? So like audit. Okay. Audit is like one of the core functions of GRC, right? You have to comply with some regulation or some standard, some framework, or the insurance companies are asking you, are you doing these things, right? So, what all an audit is, right? Is bear with me. An auditor goes and they have the things that are supposed to be there, and they ask the network engineer, are you doing this? Yes or no? No. Check. Yes or no? No. Check. All right. Then we go to HR. Are you like, reviewing people or terminating their access when they leave or whatever, like background checks? Yes. Check. Okay. And then you have your yes or no's, and then you report on it as an audit. Now, I'm not downplaying the value of audit, but what I'm saying is it's very much an entry level position because, with all due respect, it's very prescriptive and it's very structured and it's very procedural and it's very easy to systemize it and have, like, say, three entry level I used to do audits all the time. Like, you can have three entry level people who don't really understand tech or infosec or anything like that, and they're getting spun up, they're getting ramped up, and have one kind of mid-tier person manage those three auditors and say, hey, auditor, Sally, go interview the HR people, ask them these questions. Hey, Connie, go ask legal these questions, and hey, Bob, go ask IT these questions. Right? So you begin to get exposure to this information security awareness topics without the obligation of you fully understanding what is going on. Right? Now, I will just tell you that the natural migration of or evolution, excuse me, of audit goes into risk, where you actually look at the things that are not in place and then assess what is the actual risk of that not being in place by looking at the likelihood of it exploiting and then what the blast radius is of that exploitation. The other thing I would say, as far as entry level goes, is, basically like, filling out those questionnaires. That's not really audit, but it's very similar, right? A lot of businesses get these questionnaires because they're going to do business with X, Y, and Z company, and the company wants to know what's your business's security posture. Takes time to fill all those things out. It takes time to call, Carl in accounting and ask if they're doing X, Y, and Z, or the R&D people, right? So those are all totally, totally approachable entry level roles. Also, vulnerability management analyst, great entry level role. Next question.
It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity in GRC in general. So it's good to know that for people that are just now getting into the industry or that are interested in entering into a job like that, there's opportunity out there. There's overlap. And there are there are actually a couple questions about, as far as these job positions go, how safe these jobs are because of AI. So we have a question from Aaron, who's watching on Zoom, who wants to know, given AI's capabilities to rapidly automate tasks, how safe are cybersecurity jobs? And I feel like I hear this question a lot just like in conversation. And generally the consensus I feel like that I've heard is it's not that AI is going to take jobs. It's just that it will hopefully improve jobs and free up people to maybe do things that AI can't or that AI wouldn't be very good at. I don't know that it necessarily means jobs are going to like disappear, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I'm beginning to ask this question quite a bit lately. All right, so a couple things. One, AI is definitely going to help augment our jobs and make us better, kind of do some of like the grunt work, right? If you're a SOC analyst, something comes in, you go stick it in Virus Total, you maybe drop it in a dynamic engine to detonate it, right? And then the results come back. Like, AI could just do that, right? It's like taking SOAR or security orchestration, automation, and remediation. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, if I got SOAR wrong, but taking SOAR capabilities or automation and basically ratcheting it up. Now, as far as AI taking our jobs, guys, couple things. One, threat actors, cybersecurity is a cat and mouse game. We come up with like, threat actors are doing buffer overflow. So we come out with DEP and ASLR, which are acronyms. You can Google them after, right? And they're like, oh, okay, like that stopped us for a hot minute. Now we come out with return oriented programming, right? Or ROP gadgets, right? We get around those. Then we come up with control flow guards. That stops ROP. So then they come out with jump oriented programming, right? So it's a cat and mouse game. Threat actors are like water. Okay, they will always find like a path in, and if it's not working this way because there's a rock there now, they're going to find a way around it. So AI, love you, mean it, but threat actors are human. They behave like humans. They do human things, right? Like, we see living off the land. I don't know why I'm getting so hot about this, but we see living off the land attacks where they use native binaries that network admins would use, like PowerShell or whatever, on boxes. Threat actors do this all the time. You tell me, can AI tell when PowerShell is being used correctly or not correctly? And if AI, and this is the problem with like AI tuning of EDR solutions, when an EDR, an endpoint detection and response anti-malware solution, blocks the execution of an appropriate, legal, totally appropriate PowerShell command, the IT admins are like, what are you doing? You're breaking my stuff here, man. So with AI trying to do all that, that's not really going to happen. In fact, you know what we see all the time in industry, to take a page from history, what we see are these great technologies that are going to solve all our problems, right? And then we implement them. And I'm looking at you, data loss prevention, DLP, which means you can't send stuff out of the organization that's qualified as like sensitive, right? So social security, credit card numbers, anything you want. You put DLP in place, and then guess what? Nothing gets sent out. So then some engineer starts tuning it and it's still not working. And then they ultimately disable it. It's still there. You're still paid for it, but everything flows through it. And then everybody's like, yeah, no one's complaining. That's what happens. You can't, like, these technologies are supposed to be like magic. And what ends up happening is people don't want to bother with the maintenance and the upkeep and all that, and it ends up getting disabled essentially. So AI, it's good. It's going to augment, but it's certainly not going to replace. No way.
Sure, it can do some things, but it can't do everything that maybe a person could do, especially in a job like this where you need to be able to differentiate as a person, like you said, whether a PowerShell is being used appropriately or not. So I definitely think that's something that comes up a lot. And I can see why you get a little bit heated about it because it is a hot button topic right now. It comes up a
Yeah.
lot with things like ChatGPT being in the conversation now. We talked a little bit earlier too about cyber insurance. Cyber insurance. We had a whole slide on that and talked about that. And we have a question from Roman, who's watching on YouTube. Roman asks, "What is your take on people saying cyber insurance gives companies an excuse to hire less security staff?" And I kind of feel like maybe this, I've never heard that this argument before. Maybe this is a real argument, but I would think that it wouldn't serve as an argument because your cyber insurance is going to cost more if if you don't have the security staff necessary. Wouldn't that just raise your premium?
Yeah, exactly. So, and for full disclosure for all chat, I'm going to try to be succinct in my responses because I want to get to a bunch of questions if possible. So, Roman, great question. This is actually, this was the model and the mindset of the business between like 2017, 18, and 2020, 21. They would literally say, like, why do I need to invest in cyber? I'll just buy a policy, and if crap happens or if bad things happen, I'll just, call in the policy, and there you go. So that was the mindset. It does not replace a cybersecurity program. If anything, it just augments and allows you to be made whole from a financial perspective if you do suffer an incident. And to Sophie's point, she's 100% correct. In today's 2023, you're not going to be able to get an insurance policy without the security staff. So this situation, this argument no longer holds water because you can't get the policy without the security staff, basically.
There's another question here that also concerns what we talked about with cyber insurance. This one comes from Jasmine, who's watching on Zoom. Jasmine's wondering if government agencies have insurance or have cyber insurance. I would imagine they would have to, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know a lot about government
Yeah, no,
agencies.
that's a great question. I don't personally know. I've worked in federal government multiple times, and it's never actually come up. Like, now that I think about it, it's never come up. Um, whether or not, because here's the thing, typically when you have insurance, it's to make you whole for lost business revenue during the downtime, right? So, like, I make widgets and then we get ransomware. I can't make widgets for a week. I make, whatever, $80,000 a day, through production and stuff like that. So to make me whole, you need to pay me 80,000 times 7 plus the cost of the incident response team plus like maybe some brand reputation or whatever. Make me whole for the revenue that I lost during that. The federal government is a not-for-profit entity that just executes on civil service. So I don't see what the insurance would really do because you're not being made whole from a compensation or revenue perspective. And maybe it would pay to hire the staff that would help, but the U.S. government actually has staff like CISA and multiple agencies, and in-house staff, frankly, in order to respond to those incidents. So I've never heard of insurance for the government, but I've never thought about it as a thought exercise. But I don't think that they need it because of what insurance is actually designed to address. Right? It's the risk of lost money. It's not the risk of being compromised.
Okay, interesting. See, I would not have thought about it that way, but I bet you're right. That's an interesting question, though. I don't know that I've ever heard that question asked
Yeah,
before.
I
So
like it.
thank you for that question, Jasmine. You're making us put on our thinking caps here. This next question comes from YouTube. It's from Ronald. Ronald's asking, how do you start threat hunting as someone who's starting out in cybersecurity, i.e., working as a SOC for a few years?
Oh, that's awesome, Ronald. Congratulations. I love it. Um, if you want to get threat hunting, first of all, a couple things. Okay, I'm going to give you like wicked actionable intel. First of all, threat hunting is basically like a SOC analyst. You're like detecting bad, right? threat hunting is going to look for bad because your detection um, tools did not catch it. Now, how can you get started with threat hunting? If you want to do basic stuff, look at your organization. Say you work at a manufacturing company, right? Go look at MITRE ATT&CK, pull down the threat actors that are actively targeting manufacturing, right? And manufacturing is the number one industry targeted by ransomware, by the way. So there's plenty of options you can pick. And then look at the indicators of compromise, right? The actual IOCs, IP addresses, artifacts, network traffic, whatever. And then go into your SIM, go into your environment and look, like it's as simple as like this IP address is a known malware or threat actor, C2 server. Drop it in your SIM and hit return and see if anything comes up, right? That's what threat hunting is. Now, one really actionable thing I want to give you is this right here. This is Prompt Sharp, right? This is Anti-Siphon or Black Hill or Rekka. It's all under the Black Hills banner, but this is their magazine. It's free. You can go sign up, catch up with me, catch me outside or whatever that phrase is, and I'll give you the link to it. It's free, but this month's episode or issue, it's literally all about threat hunting, and it's like probably 30 pages long, and all it does is explain how to do threat hunting. So, Ronald, this right here is probably your first stop if you really want to get busy on threat hunting.
Okay, so I think we might have time for maybe one or two more questions. I want to go back to Zoom for just a second. This question comes to us from Adam. Adam is asking, we talked about practical experience, but I'm pulling my hair out trying to determine where to start. Where do I begin for cybersecurity? And we did kind of mention at the beginning how there are positions that will say, you need 5 years experience for this entry level role. How do you get that kind of experience?
Yeah, great question. This is the classic catch 22 question that's been asked. There's multiple ways. Okay, multiple ways. I would be remiss if I did not mention ACI Learning, the platform that we're talking about right now. And I know they had the little promo there. Like a lot of opportunity to learn, and specifically labs. As I said in the intro, the video, practical skills reign supreme, right? So what you need to do is take on projects or labs that allow you to get practical hands-on skill. Now, I don't know if you're looking to go offensive, defensive, just general or whatever, but I mean, there's plenty of platforms that will allow you to learn offensive security through simulated range environments where you can hack into stuff and learn different capabilities. There's several ranges that allow you to do blue stuff. Just as a shameless plug, right, on Simply Cyber, there's an entire like lecture slash here's how you build a SOC lab and test it. If you want to, build a lab and do SOC work and stuff, this is one of those things where like you have to invest a little bit of your time to stand it up versus using something like ACI Learning where they've already got the environment built for you. But this is how you get practical skills. And believe me, when I tell you this, if you are in a job interview and you say, hey, listen, like they ask you a question and you're like, well, in my lab, I was able to do detection engineering on an EDR solution to be able to detect this threat, whatever this threat is. That's very compelling than saying like, I read a book about how to do detection engineering, right? Like practical skills reign supreme. So definitely like get your hands on a keyboard and do lab stuff. And if you don't know which direction you want to go, red or blue or GRC, try them all and see which one, suits your fancy. But I would say don't spend too much time going wide. Spend a little bit of time going wide and then diverge on, or excuse me, converge on one area and become good at that.
It sounds like
Please.
those resources for practical experience are available. You just have to know what to look for or where to look for them. And there's a question we got here on YouTube that says it's asking what your favorite resource is. It says, "What is Jerry's favorite resource to start learning GRC material?" So where do you recommend people look for that kind of a thing?
Oh my goodness, this must be a good friend. So for what it's worth, if you would like, I don't really pump this, but on Simply Cyber. So I have 20 years of industry experience, and I it came up in GRC, right? So I'm very specialized in GRC. I can do other stuff, but that's my bread and butter. And on Simply Cyber's school, I've actually built out an entire GRC course that goes over audit, like how to do it, audit, risk, security awareness, um, governance, how to write policies. I have labs for all of them. I have resume bullets that you get from doing the labs. I have an entire section on how to get a job in GRC once you've completed the course. So if you're really interested in learning about GRC, specifically hands-on skill, I have like 10,000, 12,000 students. I've had zero negative feedback. I've had a lot of positive feedback. I had one person tell me that the font size wasn't good, but I mean, like, that's not really about the content. So if you're really interested, go check that out. And whoever asked that, thank you for the opportunity to be able to share that.
We'll have to go ahead and look after and see where that one came from. I think
Yeah.
that's probably going to be our last question for today. We're just about out of time. Jerry, I want to thank you for joining us. This has been really informative for me, and hopefully for those watching as well. Just a lot of interesting information and reassuring to know that there's jobs that are going to be available in this industry well into the future. So thank you for that, Jerry. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this discussion today for ACI's Learning Webinar Series. And we'll see you next time.